Hello everyone, I hope you're all feeling well today. In today's video, I drew on my iPad in Procreate and want to give you some tips on digital art. I know many of you use Adobe or other kinds of software, so I won't talk specifically about Procreate features, but will focus on general digital art tips. These are the rules that I developed or discovered during my learning process and that I think are very helpful in improving your digital works. My first tip for you will be to pick a good reference or references. The photo you pick will affect the whole process of drawing. If you will choose a photo with hard lighting, you will need to think more about the values and shapes. But if you will pick a photo with soft lighting, you will need to focus more on your linear sketch, a very precise distribution of lines and proportions. At first, I would suggest to pick a photo you naturally gravitate towards, because usually it will intuitively drag you to a look that is suitable for you and your style. Usually, hard lighting photos are considered to be better for beginners, but in my case it wasn't something natural to me, to draw with big shapes and high contrast. So if you're not sure, try with different photos. You can do just a few quick studies with different types of photos and choose what you like the most. I think art often boils down to this approach. A lot of trial and error and searching for your own preferences to find your visual language. To find the right pictures, you can use, for instance, those that I or others have on Pinterest prepared for the 100 Heads Challenge. Choose a few of them, say 3 photos with different lighting, and then make quick sketches. You can give yourself 20 minutes per each study. This way you will feel whether you like linear sketches better or those built with clear shapes and strong values. It will be easier for you to select photos for more detailed, finished work, so that you don't go into a process that you find too difficult or unsuitable for your style. My next tip would be, don't forget about the background. It doesn't matter if you want to have just a plain light background or a scene behind your character. Try to plan it from the beginning. I usually use very simple background but never pure white, because I think the contrast is too high and it can drag the attention too much. It can look good, but usually when you print the drawing. When you want to show it on the screen, the white background will usually look too bright. Using a bit darker background saves your eyes from the brightness, but also helps to control the values and contrast in your drawing, especially if you are used to drawing traditionally, like in a sketchbook, and you like this analogous vibe in art. Using very dark values for the background is something that I like doing when I want to emphasize the unique lighting in the face. Remember that the light will be much clearer if there is darkness around it. This effect allows to create an interesting, kind of mysterious atmosphere in the portrait. So if you want to capture nice highlights in the dark, remember to work with this darker background from the very beginning. It's the same when you want to illustrate your character in a certain situation. Plan it from the very beginning. If you draw a character first, then drawing a background to it, for example a room, it will be very difficult and may look off. So yeah, plan the whole piece at the beginning. If you use several references and you are not sure if you will be able to combine them in your head, I suggest creating a collage first. For example, a portrait from one photo, a silhouette from a second, and a background from another. In this way, you will check whether they really match, and you will be able to work much easier and faster, because you will be looking at one collage, then at several separate photos. My next tip would be to trick your senses, especially if you worked a lot in traditional mediums and want to switch to digital. For me, it was quite difficult. I couldn't get used to the glass feeling of the iPad, and everything I did looked quite artificial. What helped me at the first was to use paper-like screen protector, but still had some problems with the process itself. What worked for me was to draw without using separate layers. I know it's quite weird because I limited myself, but at the same time it felt more natural, as in traditional art. This way I couldn't correct everything on any stage of the process. I just tried to work as I would with gouache or oil painting by adding next layers and correcting everything with next brush strokes. I didn't even knew that a liquify or transform tool existed, so I didn't use that as well. I tricked myself to think that I was still drawing in a traditional way, and I think that this transition was much less shocking for my brain. And then I gradually learned how to use some layers, I found my favorite brushes, and learned some tricks to speed up my process. I know it's quite odd because it was like drawing with some media without understanding the basic technique, but for me it was really helpful to use digital art as traditional media. Maybe it's just me, but maybe it will work for some of you as well. Some other ways to trick your mind are, for example, flipping your canvas and seeing your work with a pair of fresh eyes. Do it as often as you need and also take breaks during drawing because that also gives you a perspective to better see your drawing and spot possible mistakes. You can also use a shortcut to switch your painting into grayscale. It helps to control the values, focus on contrast and volume instead of being distracted by the hues. I even paint with colors but in grayscale mode sometimes to make a few adjustments. Somehow I feel I'm more confident when I draw in black and white because I'm just more experienced in it. So as I said, trick your senses sometimes. Do things in an unusual way, even if tutorials say otherwise. Do whatever works for you, break the rules, and find your own way. My next tip would be don't focus on details too much. Avoid zooming the picture too often and think about big forms. This way you'll be able to draw more interesting, textured, and convincing illustrations. In real life, we usually don't have the possibility to zoom something up and see the details, especially at first glance. I think that the beauty of art is reflecting how we subjectively see the world. Not as we think something should look like, but as we honestly see it. It's sometimes difficult to really focus and see the things this way because we are distracted by our thoughts and habits, but as always, practice makes progress. So try to not zoom your drawings too much and too often, even though it's tempting as many things that digital art gives us. Maybe you noticed when you went to the museums that many good paintings look amazing from a certain distance. You can see forms that create particular figures or scenes. But when you look closer, you see just groups of textures that are also amazing but more abstract. I love this effect. I think it beautifully shows the viewer how the artist sees the world. The rule number 5 would be mistakes are good. Don't erase all of your searching lines when creating a line work. You can lower their opacity and erase many of them, but keeping some imperfections helps to keep the drawing fresh and more traditional looking. If you don't want to use any messy lines, you can try to add some more weight to your line art. This way the drawing will be more interesting to look at and you can create a hierarchy of the lines. For a while I had a problem with cleaning my sketches too much. Adding a next layer on top of the initial sketch and making it perfectly clear looks kind of artificial in my opinion. I often thought, oh, that's not my sketch. It doesn't have the fresh look of traditional drawing. That's why I started to keep my initial sketch under the layer of clean line work, but with much lower opacity. Of course, as always, balance is the key, so remember about the hierarchy of the lines and avoid making your drawings look too messy. I'm aware it may sound mysterious at the beginning, but with time you'll be able to say what looks good for you and what is too clean or too chaotic. The next tip is quite similar, and it's about the variety of textures. As with the line work, too smooth and polished planes of colors might look very artificial as well. Textures help the picture to look fresh and lead the viewer's eye in a certain way planned by the artist. In abstract art, texture and composition are very often enough resources to create a good artwork. You can use this effect in digital art. You can do it by applying colors or values with specific brushes, adding textured backgrounds, or even creating some textures traditionally, scan them and add to your digital art. Whatever works for you. Experiment and see what you like. Sometimes when I see that my painting looks too smooth, I like to pick some weird, jagged brush and blend the picture in some places. So not with a smooth blend, but with something like splashes or patches of paint. I like when my paintings look like they were made with traditional media, for example with oils. So sometimes I create this effect during the process of painting, but sometimes I add it at the end as a last touch. Of course, textures don't have to be very prominent each time. They can be very subtle, like freckles on the skin. Whatever works best for your artwork. The next tip would be use a few different brushes, but not too many. I often see that beginner artists like to ask about tools and brushes, like they were key to a good artwork. Don't get me wrong, I think tools are important, but they are not the most important thing in art. Very often you can do amazing artworks with the defaulted brushes from any program. When you will develop a very specific style, then I think you can collect and create your own brushes that suit your work the best and make the process faster. But for a beginner, I think too many brushes can be distracting. I couldn't focus if I had like 20 brushes for one painting. On average, I think I use about 5 to 8, sometimes less. Sometimes I used just one if I wanted to do a quick sketch. Single brush still has many opportunities. You can make it softer and lighter or harder and more opaque. It's the same as with an HB pencil. You can successfully draw a portrait with it. What I want to say is don't focus too much on technical stuff and having different expensive brushes for each part of your drawing. Pick a few that you like and try to take advantage of their wide range of possibilities. The next tip is one of my favorites, and it's mix traditional and digital media. I love mixing media in traditional art, but even more mixing traditional with digital work. As I said previously, I had many problems with drawing initial digital sketches that would look fresh. So instead I started to take photos of my sketchbook drawings and draw on top of them digitally. Some of my favorite artworks are made this way. I think they are a great mix of quick, loose sketches and the wide range of possibilities that digital art provides. I don't actually know how it works because I still draw line work on top of the sketches, but somehow it works, so maybe it will work for you too. This rule leads us to the next one, which is there's no cheating in art. I used to hate when people said that digital art isn't real or that tracing or photo bash is cheating, or even the shortcuts like Ctrl-Z are a reason to be ashamed, because real artists wouldn't have this opportunity when working with traditional media. I don't think it's true, and I don't care about what people say in terms of art anymore. You can do whatever the heck you want and whatever works for you as an artist. There will always be someone to tell you it's wrong, so why be bothered by them anyway? When I attempted the concept art class with people who worked in gaming industry, they used photo bash technique very often. They also traced some elements of their illustrations like guns or specific plants, not because they couldn't draw them, but because it's faster. And when you work in such an industry, you need to be fast. I think in digital art, it's very often better to work smart than hard. So use as many tricks as you want and practice freehand drawing as much as you want. Maybe don't focus only on tracing everything, because it will limit your development in freehand drawing. But know that there is no cheating in art. Mix techniques, steal textures from photos, mix different ways to make your process easier, because art is already difficult as it is, and you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Honestly, I think sometimes I wouldn't even finish an illustration if at some point I wouldn't just, trace a complicated structure of a plant or steal a fabric pattern from some photo. Anyway, the last tip is what I repeat all the time, but I'm gonna say it again. Experiment to find your own way. Digital art is quite new and there are no strict rules in it. Each artist will give you different tips because that's what works for them. Even I would give you completely different tips depending on which stage of learning I currently was. At the beginning, I didn't use layers and liquify tool. Then I was so stoked when I discovered the overlay mode, I used it all the time to create highlights. Then I started to pick some of the tips from different artists to apply them into my process. I still change it depending on my mood and what I want to create. For me, it's the best way to develop your unique visual language or languages, because why limit yourself? So yeah, this is the last tip for now. Experiment to find your own way. These are all the tips I have for you today. I hope you will find at least some of them useful. I'm curious, what are your ways to create digital art? Are they similar or completely different? Let me know. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking now and let you watch the rest of the drawing session. Thank you for stopping by and see you in my next video. Bye!